to use her role to help children. The fate of children was also in the heart of Mrs. Trump's previous break from the president. In June, the ever-responsive Grisham told reporters that the First Lady hates to see children separated from their families. A statement issued through the throes of the firestorm created by the Trump administration's enforcement of a policy that was tearing migrant families apart at the southern border. Mrs. Trump, who urged a legislative solution but said the country needed to be one that governs with heart, then visited children at the border twice. The first trip was somewhat overshadowed by a curious fashion choice, as the former model sported a jacket that read, "I really don't care, do you?" And then as the controversy grew, she wore it again on the way home. The president declared the jacket was absolutely about the fake news media. Grisham said it's a jacket. There was no hidden message. But the president declared the East Wing of the White House, where the First Lady's office is located, has made a point at times to make sure it's viewed differently from the other side of the executive mansion. After the New York Times last month reported that Trump was irate that his wife's TV aboard Air Force One was tuned to CNN, her office chose not to ignore the piece of gossip, which Grisham instead issued a statement that Mrs. Trump watches any channel she wants. The First Lady has also been unafraid to smack down some of the president's closest allies. Earlier this year, after Trump's attorney Giuliani said that Mrs. Trump believed her husband about Daniels, an East Wing statement rang out, "I don't believe Mrs. Trump has ever discussed her thoughts on anything with Mr. Giuliani." Some observers believe her motives are calculated. "It's a wink-wink strategy," said Toby Berkowitz, now a professor of communications at BU. "It obviously helps the First Lady because it shows her as thoughtful and independent. It also helps him keep something he wants in the news. And to many, Mrs. Trump's efforts to distance herself are reminiscent, and in some cases as meaningless, as the moves by Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter and advisor, to consistently make her disagreements known without seeming to impact policy." But Paolo Zampoli, a businessman and longtime friend of Mrs. Trump, said, "Our First Lady is very strong. Americans are proud that our First Lady has her own opinions." Mrs. Trump, the president's third wife, has long been an unlikely political spouse. A model who emigrated from Slovenia, she largely avoided the spotlight of the campaign trail and, according to confidants, did not expect her husband to win. The couple is not joined at the hip, like some of their predecessors, such as Ronald and Nancy Reagan. And Mrs. Trump continues to live in New York during the open months of the administration so their son could finish school. A portion of her signature pro-children initiative, Be Best, is to cut down on cyberbullying, a laughable concept to some, since her husband has weaponized his Twitter account to go after his foes. Mrs. Trump, who went 24 days without a public appearance after undergoing kidney surgery, has eschewed some of the traditional First Lady duties and public appearances. Moreover, she has never commented on her husband's alleged affairs. During the height of the Daniels saga, in January, she abruptly pulled out of the president's trip to Davos, Switzerland. That time, in a break with recent patterns, the First Lady's office declined to give a reason why she did not appear, allowing observers to draw their own conclusions. Texas Republicans squelch red flag gun law prospects by Jim Fortuno. Austin, Texas. Texas schools have been adding metal detectors and armed personnel in an effort to improve campus security in response to the deadly May attack at a Houston area high school that left 8 students and 2 teachers dead. Among the steps that Texas apparently won't be taking anytime soon is tightening the restrictions on gun access for people deemed dangerous to themselves or others. In the aftermath of the May 18th attack at Santa Fe High School, Governor Abbott suggested Texas should look for ways to keep guns away from people who pose an immediate danger to others, which in the point of so-called red flag laws like those passed by 6 states since the February massacre at a Highland school in Parkland, Florida. But faced with criticism from gun enthusiasts in the country's largest conservative state, Abbott, who gets top ratings from the National Rifle Association, later clarified that he was only suggesting such laws be part of a broader conversation about school security, and he thinks there's growing opposition to the idea of gun restrictions. Lieutenant Governor Patrick, who presides over the Texas Senate, was even more forceful. "I have never supported these policies, nor has the majority of the Texas Senate," he said minutes after the last in a series of state Senate hearings on gun violence. The 1-2 punch by the state's top Republicans drew cheers from gun rights advocates in a state that has more than 1.2 million handgun license holders and allows the open carry in public of handguns and long rifles. While they vary from state to state, red flag laws generally allow law enforcement or family members to ask a judge to order the seizure or surrender of guns from someone who is deemed dangerous, often because of mental health concerns or threats of violence. About a dozen states have red flag laws, including the Republican-led Florida, which passed its law following the Parkland school attack. Texas can deny a handgun license based on a person's mental health history, but that restriction applies to the license to carry a handgun, not buying one. The state can seize weapons from people determined to be in a mental crisis in some circumstances. Some gun right activists worry that expanding the red flag laws, which allow the government to seize someone's guns based on the suspicion of a threat or a false report without that person having acted violently. Red flag laws are nothing more than ways to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding persons on nothing more than mere suspicion, said Grisham, leader of gun rights group Open Carry Texas, which has pushed to reduce gun restrictions for years. You never get good policy when you base it off emotion. Abbott's suggestion after the Santa Fe attack that Texas should consider keeping guns away from people who pose an immediate danger to others surprised many, because neither he nor any of the state Republican leaders even suggested tightening gun laws after last November's massacre at a church in Sutherland Springs near San Antonio. Police said the teenage suspect in the Santa Fe shooting took his father's weapons, and there hadn't been any prior reports that he may have been mentally ill. But a red flag law might have helped in the church shooting. The Air Force failed to properly notify federal law enforcement agencies of the gunman's previous felony domestic violence conviction, and the gunman had spent time at a mental health hospital in New Mexico. Shortly after the Santa Fe shooting, Abbott held meetings with law enforcement officials, educators, mental health experts, attack survivors, and victim family members. A gun control group, Texas Gun Sense, got a seat next to the governor, and on his other side was the Texas State Rifle Association, the state arm of the NRA. Few expected major gun control proposals, but after years of watching Texas lawmakers make it easier and cheaper to get a handgun license and carry weapons in public, gun control advocates felt like they finally had a foot in the door, only to get it crushed again. Advocates for red flag laws said they can help prevent violence before it starts, unlike armed teachers and school marshals who can react after an attack has already begun. Abbott's 43-page school safety and gun violence plan focused on getting more armed guards and personnel on campus, improving gun storage safety laws, boosting mental health screenings. It's been a wave in other states, even with Republican governors, but not Texas, said Gil Schweitzer, executive director of Texas Gun Sense. What keeps me up at night is worrying that there'll be another situation. I don't want us to have to learn from another really sad situation. Soon after Abbott called for the conversation on red flag laws, the state Republican Party convention platform in June specifically opposed them. The issue drew strong opposition at the legislative hearings. In his speech to the state GOP convention, Abbott promised he would protect gun rights. The people of Sutherland Springs, they looked me in the eye and they insisted. They said, "Governor, do not let them use this to take away our guns." The President's Press Bashing is on a Perilous Path by Bill Ketter. Presidents since the nation's founding have at times disparaged the press for reporting news and expressing opinions they find uncomfortable or unfavorable. It's a natural tension that results from the primary purpose of the press to inform the people and the propensity of presidents to control their message to shape the opinion of the people. Political power does not like to be held accountable, yet that is the explicit reason James Madison and other authors of the Bill of Rights created the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. President Donald Trump is unusual among the presidents in his unrelenting enmity toward the press. He made the news media the whipping boy of his populist politics. News is fake when he doesn't like it. Journalists are the enemy of the people if they don't toe his line. And no patriotic American should believe anything except his version of the truth. The latest example occurred last Tuesday during a Trump rally in Tampa, Florida. Supporters screamed vulgarities at reporters, showing their contempt with raised middle fingers. Chants of "CNN sucks" greeted White House correspondent Jim Acosta during his live reporting on the event. Trump even shared a video of the CNN badgering with his 53 million Twitter followers. The public castigating of the press has become a regular feature of Trump's impromptu political rallies, causing CNN and other news organizations to fear for the safety of their journalists. Acosta said after the Tampa gathering that he's very worried the bellicosity encouraged by the president will lead to violence. "We should not treat our fellow Americans this way," Acosta tweeted. "The press is not the enemy." New York Times publisher Schultzberger met with Trump at his invitation the day before at the Tampa rally to warn the president his inflammatory anti-press rhetoric has already contributed to increased threats against journalists in the U.S. and abroad, and will lead to violence. Trump's ill will toward journalism and journalists has an edge that goes beyond the criticism for the press. It fosters unparalleled public loathing for an institution that's been critical to our democratic society for more than 2 centuries. The ferment of political polarization doesn't help, causing portrayal of the press as liberal or conservative in news coverage, far right or far left in its commentary. The soil is fertile for a master propagandist like Trump to sow seeds of distrust. Yet when you truly think about it, your need for a free and independent press as a watchdog on government power and influence has never been greater. We live in an era when truth is easily blurred on the internet, social media by deceptive, misleading, and disconnected bits of information. The role of the press is to connect the dots to the unvarnished truth as it can be best determined. The job of journalists is to report facts that give certainty to uncertainty. They are not the enemy of the people. They are the surrogate of the people. For the president of the country to inflame the public, to disrupt and threaten the safety of journalists is not only insidious, it is destructive to the primary purpose of the press under our form of government. That's all the time we have for today for the Lawrence Eagle. Thanks for listening.
You've just heard news stories from the Lawrence Eagle. Please stay tuned for more programming.
Hi, this is Bob Branco, one of the co-hosts for In Perspective. You can still hear our programs on the TIC website. Just go to www.ticnetwork.org and hear any show that's available to you. Again, www.ticnetwork.org.
Thank you for listening to the Massachusetts Reading Network, a window to independent life in your community from Cape Cod to the Berkshires.
Hi, this is volunteer reader Rita, broadcasting from Marshall, Massachusetts. Stay tuned for more coming your way next.
WRRS Middleborough, Pittsfield, WVBF Middleborough, WDJM Framingham, WUML Lowell, WLLO Londonderry.
Coming up next from the Talking Information Center, news stories from the Fall River Herald.
Hello and welcome to the Massachusetts Reading Network. Here is the Herald News for Monday, August 6th. Formation of Fall River Gang Task Force nets 38 arrests. Fall River. Police say the creation of a crime and gang-focused task force has led to numerous arrests in the city and the seizing of firearms. According to police, the task force was formed at the order of Chief Albert Duperret and includes a rotation of officers from the Major Crimes, Vice and Intelligence, Special Operations, and Uniforms divisions. Fall River officers also worked with the Massachusetts State Police Violent Fugitive Apprehension Section and members of the FBI Gang Task Force. Among other incidents, the group worked to investigate 2 shootings that occurred in June on Pine Street, an armed robbery and a shooting incident on Water Street, and a daytime shooting on Rowcliffe Street in July. In total, police report 38 arrests made by the task force, 5 of which involved gun-related incidents, 7 that were drug-related, and 24 arrests of known gang members or gang associates. 1 arrest was of a person wanted for a shooting in Maine that fled to Fall River. One of the latest arrests, according to police, resulted in the apprehension of Christopher DeJesus, 19, and a 16-year-old. According to police officer Matthew Mendes, Officer Matthew Mendes learned that the Asian Boys Street Gang was using 14 Downing Street as their hangout. Gathering information from social media, the police witnessed a video in which DeJesus and the juvenile were mentioning firearms and pointing them toward the camera while being recorded. One of the firearms was very distinct, with a tan, cream-colored grip and an extended magazine, police said in a release. Officers then began an undercover surveillance of the area around 14 Downing Street and observed DeJesus and the juvenile standing in the yard. Concerned they were armed, the officers attempted to approach the pair, taking DeJesus into custody, while the juvenile attempted to flee through the building, before being apprehended at the front of the building. In a basement common area, officers then located the firearm, later identified as a Springfield Armory 911 .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol, equipped with a high-capacity loaded extended magazine, seen in the video in plain view. After obtaining a search warrant, officers found a plastic bag containing 12 rounds of ammunition hidden in a drop ceiling. DeJesus was charged with unlawful possession of a large-capacity firearm, unlawful possession of a large-capacity feeding device, possession of ammunition without an FID card, firearm violation with 1 prior violent/drug crime conviction. The 16-year-old juvenile was charged with unlawful possession of a large-capacity firearm, unlawful possession of a large-capacity feeding device, possession of ammunition without an FID card, and firearm violation with 1 prior violent/drug crime conviction. The Fall River Police Department is dedicated in reducing the fear of crime and most importantly, improving the quality of life in the neighborhoods that were victimized by these acts of violence. The incidents investigated throughout this operation all were targeted acts of violence against rival gang members and associates. In just over a month, this task force made a dramatic impact on crime in our city, placed many gang members in jail, and seized numerous illegal firearms off of our streets. The team also worked heavily on gathering intelligence in order to better understand the gang crime patterns in our city, how to proactively prevent violent crime, and also act quickly toward resolution in the wake of an incident, police said in a statement. Next up, a quick reminder. Heat advisory posted through Tuesday night. The National Weather Service has issued a heat advisory for most of Massachusetts, except Cape Cod and the islands, from 11 a.m. Monday through 8 p.m. Tuesday. The temperature is expected to be in the mid-90s with strong sunshine and uncomfortable humidity. Forecasters say it will feel like 100 degrees. Those with health problems are advised to stay in places with air conditioning. No rain is expected until Tuesday night, with a chance of showers and thunderstorms. Next, geologists examine Rhode Island Sound seabed for wind turbines. North Kingstown, Rhode Island. Before you can build a wind farm in the ocean, you have to understand what's on and underneath the ocean floor. The differences between sand, silt, rocks, and clay will go a long way to determining what kind of foundations can be used to hold towering wind turbines above the water's surface, and how those foundations will be anchored to the bottom. That data is crucial to how we build a wind farm, said Paul Murphy, Vice President of Operations and Engineering at Deepwater Wind. Deepwater is set to embark on a study that could last a month or more to determine the underwater geology of 256 square miles of Rhode Island Sound, about 18 miles southeast of Block Island. There, in waters that it's leasing from the federal government, the Providence-based company plans to install dozens and dozens of wind turbines over the next decade to supply power to New York, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. A lift boat brought to Rhode Island from Louisiana and retrofitted with a drilling rig at the Quonset Business Park was set to depart Sunday for Deepwater's lease area, where it will take core samples from deep within the ocean bottom. Once it's in place, the specialty ship, named Supporter, will lower 3 tubular legs to the seabed about 120 feet below, and then raise itself up about 30 feet above the water to create a stable base for drilling to proceed. The results of the survey will be used to supplement the construction and operations plans that Deepwater must submit for approval to the Federal Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the arm of the U.S. Department of the Interior that oversees all offshore energy. Deepwater filed the plan earlier this summer for the South Fork Wind Farm, the 90-megawatt project that would supply power to Long Island and constitute the first round of development in the federal lease area. The plan for the Revolution Wind Farm, the 400-megawatt project selected by the Raimondo administration in May to supply power to Rhode Island, will follow at an undetermined date. Plans for 200-megawatt project, chosen by Connecticut in June, are at an earlier stage of development. Deepwater is one of 3 companies that are planning wind farms in the same general swath of waters between Block Island and Martha's Vineyard. Vineyard Wind and Bay State Wind, both companies with foreign investors and offices in New Bedford, are the others. Supporter, the distinctive ship with 200-foot-long legs owned by Dubai-based Falcon Global, was brought up from the Gulf of Mexico because there are no ships like it in the Northeast. With offshore wind development only just beginning in southern New England, Deepwater completed the first project off Block Island in 2016. An offshore construction industry in the region is still absent, and companies must rely on ships built for oil and gas exploration in the Gulf. The 28 people on the boat, its crew, drillers, engineers, and marine mammal observers, will work in shifts around the clock so that core samples can be taken from up to 10 locations around the ocean. The geology off the Rhode Island coast is complex, said Diane Baxter, Associate Principal with GZA Geoenvironmental of Norwood, Massachusetts. When glaciers receded during the last ice age thousands of years ago, they left behind rocks and mixtures of sands and soils. To gain a better understanding of the consistency of the ocean bottom, she'll direct a team that will drill 200 feet into the sediments, taking 10-foot-long samples of about 3 inches in diameter along the way. You don't know what you'll find until you get there, said Baxter. One of the key qualities of the sediments that Baxter and the other engineers are interested in is their stiffness. Deepwater will feed the data they collect into a computer model that will look at how different foundation types, including latticework jackets like those at the Block Island wind farm, or monopiles that are common in Europe, would fare over time under different wave and wind conditions. Deepwater has yet to configure the wind farm, or even decide on the types of foundations it will use. We're going to let the data make the decision, said Murphy. Let's continue with this. State is reducing how much they give Westport for beaches. Westport. The town has some picturesque beaches and even gets a reimbursement from the state for some of its state-owned properties. However, the town got some bad news, learning that next year it will be reimbursed $230,000 less for those areas. State Senator Michael Rodriguez wrote a letter explaining that the change in land valuation and the formula to determine it triggered the reduction. Rodriguez lobbied to secure more funding this year so that impacted communities such as Westport would receive the same reimbursement for fiscal 2019. In Westport's case, that amounts to $838,058. Starting next fiscal year, the reduction will take effect, leading to an approximate reimbursement of $608,000. The senator helped us push back on the reduction. We weren't anticipating it, and that's a pretty big cut to suddenly absorb. He was successful in getting us a delay in that reduction, so we have time to plan for it in next year's budget, Selectman Chairwoman Shauna Schufelt explained. The money goes into the town's general fund and is part of the total revenue available for the overall operating budget. It helps us this year, but won't be there for next year's budget. She added, the money is part of our total assessments from the state. I think of it as sort of like property tax for that land. If it was privately owned, we'd be due property tax. Because it's state-owned, we get this instead. Schufelt announced this change at the start of the last selectmen's meeting and said recently that town officials have not begun formally mulling over the fiscal 2020 budget to determine how the town would account for the change. Selectmen in recent years have tasked the town manager with beginning the fiscal planning in the fall before meeting with selectmen. The Finance Committee conducts its own meetings and in early winter is given a budget from the town administrator to make its own recommendations. According to Rodriguez's office, the State Department of Revenue uses local assessors' maps to calculate the reimbursement formula. Horseneck Beach and Gooseberry Island are two of the most prominent and visited state-owned lands in the area. Let's continue with this. Amazon removes Nazi-themed items after complaints. Amazon says it has removed items with Nazi or white supremacist symbols from its website after criticism from advocacy groups. An Amazon executive said the company blocked the accounts of some retailers and might suspend them. Democratic U.S. Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota complained to Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos last month. The company's Vice President of Public Policy, Brian Huseman, responded to Ellison, telling him that Amazon prohibits listing products that promote or glorify hatred, violence, or intolerance. A spokesman of Seattle-based Amazon.com Inc. declined to comment further on Sunday. In early July, the Partnership for Working Families and the Action Center on Race and the Economy highlighted Amazon listings included swastika pendants, baby onesies with burning cross logos, and a costume that makes the wearer look like he has been lynched. The model appears to be a black man. The group said the Amazon's weak and inadequately enforced policies allowed racist, anti-Muslim, and anti-Semitic groups to generate money and spread their ideas. Ellison, who was deputy chair of the Democratic National Convention, asked Bezos how much money Amazon made from selling material, including books published by hate groups, since 2015, and whether it would destroy such merchandise at its warehouses. Huseman said Amazon makes a significant investment in enforcing seller policies, including automated tools to scan listings and automatically removing those that violate its policies. The executive said Amazon was preventing the sale of the items in question and was in the process of removing them from fulfillment centers. Facts of Life star Charlotte Rae dies at 92. Los Angeles. Charlotte Rae, who played a wise and patient house mother to a brood of teenage girls on the long-running sitcom The Facts of Life, during a career that encompassed many other TV roles as well as stage and film appearances, has died. She was 92. Rae died at her Los Angeles home Sunday with her family at her side, said her publicist, Harlan Ball. A cause of death was not immediately available, but Rae was diagnosed last year with bone cancer after beating pancreatic cancer, Ball said. She originated the character of Mrs. Garrett in 1978 during the first season of NBC's comedy Different Strokes, then took Mrs. Garrett with her for the spin-off Facts, which premiered the following season. Initially set at a girls' boarding school, that NBC series ran for 9 seasons. Rae left after its 7th year, however, explaining later, "I needed some time for the rest of my life." The Facts role came to Rae after years of theater and television performances. She earned an Emmy nomination for the part and was a 2-time Tony nominee for her work on Broadway. Her last feature film credit was Ricky and the Flash with Meryl Streep in 2015. That same year, she released her autobiography, The Facts of My Life, co-written by her son, Larry Strauss. Mindy Cohn and Kim Fields, who played members of Mrs. Garrett's brood, recalled her lovingly. "She was my champion, a teacher, a proud example of the tenacity and perseverance needed to live as a creative, along with your talent and gifts. I love you, Char," Cohn, who played Natalie, posted on Instagram. "Sorry, no words at the moment, just love and tears. And yeah, smiles," tweeted Fields, who portrayed Tootie. Tony Award-winning actress Audra McDonald tweeted, "She was so sweet, funny, wise, lovely, and brilliant. She will be so missed. Rest in peace, sweet Charlotte Rae." Todd Bridges, who was on Different Strokes, said on Twitter that she was beloved by all her colleagues and that the show would not have been the same without you. Edna Garrett provided kind, if sometimes wry, counsel to her facts of life charges, which, besides Cohn and Fields, included Lisa Welshel, Nancy McKeon, and Molly Ringwald, on a series that was praised for dealing with such sensitive issues of teenhood as sex, drug use, eating disorders, and peer pressure. I wanted to bring in as much humanity as possible, as well as the humor, Ray told the Associated Press early in the show's run. I don't want her to be Polly perfect, because she must have human failings and make mistakes. Her own life was marked by tragedy, Ray told the Associated Press in a 2015 interview. She said the most devastating thing she faced was her son, Andy Strauss's diagnosis of autism, at a time when there was far less understanding of or attention to the disorder. Andy died in his mid-40s of a heart attack in 1999. Born Charlotte Ray Lubotsky in Milwaukee on April 22, 1926, she had studied drama at Northwestern University, then moved to New York, where, despite early plans to be a serious actress, she quickly found work doing satirical sketches in Greenwich Village clubs. It was there that Broadway producers, who frequented such bistros, discovered her, leading to her first Broadway musical, called Three Wishes for Jamie, in 1952. A few years later, she originated the role of Mammy Yoakum in the Broadway musical Little Abner. Ray made numerous TV appearances in the 1950s drama anthologies, including the U.S. Steel Hour, Playhouse 90, and Armstrong Circle Theater, sharing the black and white screen with such actors as Zero Mostel, Art Carney, and Gertrude Berg. In 1961, she became a semi-regular on the New York-based cop sitcom Car 54 Where Are You?, as the wife of the NYPD officer, played by future Munster's grandpa, Al Lewis. She received Tony nominations in 1966 for Pickwick and in 1969 for Morning, Noon, and Night. In the early 1970s, Ray moved to Los Angeles with her then-husband, composer, and music editor, John Strauss, and their sons, Andy and Larry. There she was cast in the short-lived Norman Lear sitcom, Hot L. Baltimore, and a similarly unsuccessful variety show hosted by Rich Little, before scoring Different Strokes, on which Mrs. Garrett was the family's housekeeper. Ray stayed busy with film and stage appearances, including 1971's Bananas from Woody Allen and 1979's Hair. Other credits included the 2008 comedy You Don't Mess with the Zohan and the 2012 thriller Love, Sick Love. In 2005, at age 79, she appeared in a new comedy, Leading Ladies, at Ford's Theater in Washington. In 2013, Ray went public with an account of why her marriage to Strauss had ended in the mid-1970s, after a quarter century. He said he disclosed to her he was bisexual and wanted an open marriage. Strauss died in 2011. In addition to son Larry, she is survived by sister Miriam Guten and 3 grandchildren. Services were pending, Bowl said. This from Tiverton. The school department will sell equipment that is no longer needed. It is not a typical yard sale by any means, but what will be typical is there will likely be many early birds hoping to snag some good deals. The school department is having a yard sale Thursday morning from 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. in the parking lot of the high school at 100 North Brayton Road. It's a sale of equipment that is no longer needed by the school department, including a battered but functional truck with a plow, a riding mower, some gently used commercial cooking equipment, a lunch truck, a 50-year-old table saw, and other old woodworking equipment. The bylaws say we can't throw it away unless it's completely broken, said Michael Mendes, Director of Maintenance for the school department. So he collects the stuff and every few years has a yard sale to try to unload it. One reason for this sale is not only to free up space and make a little money that will go back into a maintenance account, but to finally get rid of a leased storage unit that he said is costing the school department $1,000 a month. It would be cheaper in the long run to buy one, he said. For years, the department leased 3 storage units in the rear of the high school parking lot when the renovations were being done to the school a decade ago. He's now down to 1 unit and looks forward to getting rid of it. It's ridiculous to keep paying out, he said. There are 2 commercial convection ovens from the elementary schools that were used for just 2 to 3 years before they were sent to storage, never to return to the schools. Mendes said that was when the new Ranger School was being built and Fort Barton School was being rehabilitated. The contracts for the schools called for all new equipment, so the ovens, which can hold 5 sheet pans at a time, have been in storage ever since. New they'd cost $5,000 to $6,000, Mendes said. If we get half of that, he said, he will be happy. There's a commercial mixer and a 2-bay stainless steel sink from the high school. The state said we needed 3 bays, Mendes said. It comes with a faucet and all. Walking deeper into the storage container, he pointed to serving lines, serving tables used in cafeterias that are just 2 to 3 years old, and 2 portable serving lines. The White brand riding mower is 10 years old. We had to upgrade, Mendes said. It wasn't wide enough for the large lawns that have to be cut at the schools. 2 table saws, original to the woodworking shop at the high school when it opened 50 years ago, will be for sale. They still work. They made stuff to last, Mendes said. A Rockwell thickness planer from one of the 2 woodworking shops at the middle school is 40 years old. Brand new, it would cost $4,000, he said. It's being sold because there is just 1 woodworking shop at the school now. We don't buy new stuff very often, he said, explaining why there are many pieces that are decades old. The truck with plow that will be for sale is a 2006 Ford F-350. It's good for plowing small lots, Mendes said. It's worn. People who are mechanically inclined might want it. I'd easily take $1,000 for it. I'll have people here at 7 a.m., Mendes said, and they will have first pick. It's who shows up first, just like any yard sale, he said. Whatever doesn't sell, I'll bring to the scrapyard. And that completes the reading of Fall River's Herald News for Monday, August 6th. Thank you for listening.
You've just heard news stories from the Fall River Herald. Please stay tuned for more programming.
Coming soon from the Talking Information Center, join reader Netta Vercoloni as she presents the book We Were the Lucky Ones by Georgia Hunter. It is the spring of 1939 and 3 generations of the Kirk family are doing their best to live normal lives, even as the shadow of war grows closer. The talk around the family table is of new babies and budding romance, not of increasing hardships threatening Jews, but soon the horrors overtaking Europe will become inescapable, and the Kirks will be flung to the far corners of the world, each desperately trying to navigate his or her own path to safety. As one sibling is forced into exile, another attempts to flee the continent, while others struggle to escape certain death, either by working grueling hours on empty stomachs in the factories of the ghetto, or by hiding as Gentiles in plain sight. Driven by an unwavering will to survive, and by the fear that they may never see one another again, the Kirks must rely on hope and inner strength to persevere. An extraordinary, propulsive novel, We Were the Lucky Ones, demonstrates how in the face of the 20th century's darkest moment, the human spirit can endure and even thrive. We Were the Lucky Ones, by Georgia Hunter, will air for 15 episodes on the Slick Mix Book Hour beginning August 21st and ending September 10th.
Thank you for listening to the Massachusetts Reading Network, a window to independent life in your community from Cape Cod to the Berkshires.
Hi, this is volunteer reader Fred Tilley, broadcasting from Marshfield, Massachusetts. Stay tuned for more, coming your way next.
WRRS Middleborough, Pittsfield, WVBF Middleborough, WDJM Framingham, WUML Lowell, WLLO Londonderry.
Coming up next from the Talking Information Center, news stories from the New Bedford Times.
Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, August 6th, and I'm pleased to be reading to you from the New Bedford Standard Times. Caption, It Gets Better Every Year. Festival goers bid farewell to another feast of the Blessed Sacrament by Amy Chivaroli. New Bedford. Some participating in the Feast of the Blessed Sacrament parade Sunday afternoon carried water with them, at times in the form of spray bottles that they used on themselves and the crowds lining the streets. When the parade came to an end, Alfred Gonsalves, 90, of Fall River, packed up his metal rocking lawn chair and obtained a cold bottle of water. Asked what he thought of the parade, he said, "It was outstanding. It gets better every year." UConn to open state's first milk depot for newborns, Farmington, Connecticut. The University of Connecticut's John Dempsey Hospital is opening the state's first milk depot. The center, which operates like a blood bank, will serve as collection point for the distribution of donated pasteurized human milk to babies at neonatal intensive care units across the Northeast. The hospital will be working with Mother's Milk Bank Northeast to find and screen breast milk donors in Connecticut. The donations will be accepted at the hospital and kept at Yukon Health in a new freezer before being shipped to the Mother's Milk Bank in Massachusetts for pasteurization, processing, and distribution. Yukon officials say mothers with premature newborns often experience difficulty creating enough breast milk while their baby is in intensive care. They say donor milk is a more beneficial substitute than formula. Absentee ballots now available for Massachusetts primary, Boston. Absentee ballots are now available for the Massachusetts primary election. Democratic State Secretary William Galvin said the ballots are available in every city and town. Voters can also ask for a ballot to be mailed to them. He said college students who live in the state and will be heading back to school can obtain their ballots and cast them before they leave. The primary is scheduled for Tuesday, September 4 this year, just one day after the Labor Day holiday. Galvin said voters should check with their city or town clerk about the best time to come into the office to vote by absentee ballot. There's no early voting allowed in the primary election. Wet weather caused freight train carrying acid to derail in Wendell. A freight train carrying acid derailed in Massachusetts because of stormy weather. State fire officials say a Pan Am Railway's partial freight train derailed early Saturday in Wendell, a rural town of about 800 residents next to the Connecticut River Valley. They say they believe wet weather was the cause. 4 of the 6 cars overturned. One of the cars was filled with hydrochloric acid, which is corrosive and is used for making batteries and fireworks. An evaluation of the car reveals no hazardous material leaks or reactions took place. And from the editorial page, column editorial roundup, Trump isn't taking the Russia threat seriously, but lawmakers can show they are. Really, we get it, was the message from the White House briefing room Thursday as a pantheon of senior national security officials insisted that Russia has meddled and continues to meddle in U.S. elections. Our focus here today is simply to tell the American people we acknowledge the threat. It is real. It is continuing, and we're hoping everything we can to have a legitimate election the American people can have trust in. Director of National Intelligence Daniel Coates said, FBI Director Christopher Wray warned of malign influence operations and information warfare. National Security Agency Director Paul Nakasone promised that we are not going to accept meddling in the elections. But try as they might to reassure Americans that their government is responding to a clear threat from an avowed foreign rival, they could not control their boss. In Helsinki, I had a great meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, President Trump said that evening at a rally in Pennsylvania. Now we're being hindered by the Russian hoax. Just as his senior national security staff attempted to calm Americans worried that their president is sidling up to an authoritarian who means the United States harm, Trump encouraged his supporters to doubt essential facts about Russia and its intentions. Trump's comments and those of his staff come just about a week after he held his first National Security Council meeting on election security. Think of that. It took more than a year and a half from his inauguration. The Post's Ellen Nakashima reported that the meeting lasted less than an hour and produced no new orders. Clearly, Congress must take the lead in ensuring a robust response to the Russians' 2016 meddling that deters future interference. Congress has already insisted on anti-Russian sanctions once since 2016, but many lawmakers complain the Trump administration has enforced them unevenly. Intelligence officials warned that the Russians have not been deterred. The recent news that Facebook found pages and fake accounts that appear to be associated with the Kremlin is an ominous sign. A more assertive response is needed. A bipartisan group of senators proposed Thursday a package of new sanctions and reforms that should start that conversation. Led by Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Robert Menendez, the group would target major oligarchs and other prominent members of Putin's inner circle. It would squeeze investment in Russian oil and gas projects and in Russian sovereign debt. And it would shed more light on Russian financial dealings in the United States by requiring reports on large real estate transactions inside the country. Their bill would also give the government new powers to crack down on cyber wrongdoers. Federal prosecutors could close botnets that enable criminal activity, and they could charge anyone hacking into voting systems used in federal elections with a federal crime. The president is not taking the Russian threat seriously enough, but lawmakers can show they really get it. Editorial roundup, caption: Congress could have reformed flood insurance, but let the opportunity float away. It's August, which means peak Atlantic hurricane season is upon us. We hope the damage won't be anything like last year's, which saw catastrophic strike Texas, Florida, and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. No matter what the weather has in store, we already know the United States enters this key period in a longer term of possibly increased extreme weather because of climate change, having failed to act on a major lesson of past storms. Specifically, Congress is about to perpetuate the National Flood Insurance Program without any reforms to this increasingly dysfunctional program. Enacted 50 years ago as a delayed response to the havoc Hurricane Betsy wreaked on the Gulf Coast in 1965, the program made a certain sense in theory. The private sector lacked the analytical sophistication or capital to insure against such risks, so the government would do so in return for appropriate local land use and other measures to prevent development in low-lying areas and for actually sound premiums. Politics being what they are, the program gradually fell prey to pressure from developers and homeowners in the nation's coastal areas. Arguably, the existence of flood insurance encouraged development in flood zones that would not have occurred otherwise. Certain properties, overwhelmingly concentrated in a handful of Louisiana, Texas, New Jersey, and New York counties, have collected repeated insurance payments. People who own property by the beach tend to be better off than average, which makes this a permanent taxpayer subsidy to upper-income people, too. Not surprisingly, revenue consistently lagged costs until Hurricane Katrina in 2005 essentially bankrupted the program. In fiscal 2017, it took in $4.2 billion and paid out $6.9 billion, raising the program's total debt to $20.3 billion. This is about $100 billion below its legal limit, but only because Congress canceled $16 billion in debt last year. Ideally, more of the costs of flood insurance would be shouldered by the people and places who benefit most from it. Modern technology and financial tools should enable the private sector to handle more of the business, too. Such radical reform is not on Congress's agenda, of course, but lawmakers could at least try more modest updates in the spirit of a 2012 bipartisan measure that would have transitioned the program's more than 5 million customers into new and more actuarially accurate insurance premiums. That necessarily implied higher premiums for many homeowners, however. So under pressure from aggrieved constituents, Congress reversed the reform in 2014. In 2018, there was another opportunity to reform the program created by its scheduled expiration during the year. And Congress has missed it. Coastal area lawmakers of both parties in both houses pushed instead for yet another short-term bill to reauthorize the program more or less as it is. A measure doing that passed both houses, and President Donald Trump signed it on Tuesday. It expires November 30. Take note of that date. It keeps the program going through the end of the hurricane season, and perhaps more importantly, to the politicians through the end of election season. From Nation and World News page, caption, Powerful Quake Rocks Indonesia. Second earthquake hits tourist island of Lombok 1 week after first. 82 dead. By Ross Idin and Ali Kotarumalos from the Associated Press. Mataram, Indonesia. A powerful earthquake struck the Indonesian tourist island of Lombok on Sunday, killing at least 82 people and shaking neighboring Bali, 1 week after another quake on Lombok killed more than a dozen. The latest quake, which triggered a brief tsunami warning, damaged buildings as far away as Denpasar on Bali, including a department store and the airport terminal, where ceiling panels were shaken loose, authorities said. Videos showed screaming people running in panic from houses in Bali neighborhood and vehicles rocking. On Lombok, soldiers and other rescuers carried injured people on stretchers and carpets to an evacuation center. National Disaster Mitigation Agency spokesman Sutopo Purwo Nugroho said the toll had risen 82, with hundreds of others were injured. Earlier, officials said at least 39 people had died. A total of 65 of the deaths in North Lombok District, 9 in West Lombok District, 4 in the provincial capital Mataram, and 2 each in Central Lombok and East Lombok districts, Nugroho said. Thousands of houses were damaged, and most of the dead victims were hit by collapsed houses, Nugroho said. The quake, recorded at magnitude 7.0 by the U.S. Geological Survey, struck early Sunday evening at a depth of 10.5 kilometers, 6 miles, in the northern part of Lombok. I was watching TV when I felt a big shake, said Harian, a Lombok woman who uses one name. The lamp was shaking, and people were shouting, "Get out!" I ran out into the dark because the power cut off. A tsunami warning was lifted after waves just 15 centimeters, that's 6 inches, high, were recorded in 3 villages that Drakarita Karnawati, the head of Indonesia's meteorology, climatology, and geophysics agency. The quake was felt strongly across Lombok and Bali and had damaged houses on both islands, Nugroho said. Frightened people poured out of their homes to move to higher ground, particularly in North Lombok and Mataram, the capital of West Nusa Tenggara province, in Iuran Asmara, a Lombok disaster official. The Bali and Lombok airports continued operating Sunday night, according to the Director General of Civil Aviation. The Bali and Lombok airports continued operating Sunday night, according to the Director General of Civil Aviation. There had been a half-hour evacuation at the Lombok airport following the quake because the electricity went off. TV showed crying women consoling each other outside Lombok's airport. The island was already reeling from a magnitude 6.4 quake on July 29, which killed 16 people. Like Bali, Lombok is known for pristine beaches and mountains. Hotels and other buildings in both locations are not allowed to exceed the height of coconut trees. Indonesia is prone to earthquakes because of its location on the Pacific Ring of Fire, an arc of volcanoes and fault lines in the Pacific Basin. In December 24, a massive magnitude 9.1 earthquake off Sumatra Island triggered a tsunami that killed 230,000 people in a dozen countries. And from the sports page, caption, Allen looking to bounce back as compliment to Gronk, by Rich Garvin, Foxborough. In their continuous quest to find a reliable, complementary tight end to Rob Gronkowski, the Patriots acquired Dwayne Allen from the Indianapolis Colts in March of 2017. Allen replaced Martellus Bennett, who priced himself out of New England after one productive season. Bennett stepped in for Scott Chandler, who played himself out of a job with his unimpressive body of work in 2015. It turned out Allen was more like Chandler than Bennett, but not so much the Patriots were willing to move on from him in the off-season. The seventh-year pro chalked up his underwhelming play to health issues. A lot was missing health-wise, Allen said during a break in training camp. I feel a lot better this year. The biggest struggle in this game and in the NFL is keeping that health. So I take it one day at a time, make sure I get it into my routine, and make sure I take care of my body. Interestingly enough, Allen never showed up on the injury report and didn't miss a game last season. That leads one to believe conditioning, or lack thereof, may have been his main culprit. Whatever the problem was, it's apparently solved. Allen said he now understands taking care of the body is the biggest thing after an off-season spent working very closely with team strength and conditioning staff, training staff, and nutritionists. It's all translated to a player who is more self-assured. It definitely gives me confidence in order to go out there and do my job, Allen said. So I just try to go out there and execute my job, whatever it is. Allen, who spent his first 5 seasons in Indianapolis after being drafted in the 3rd round, 64th overall, by the Colts in 2012, following an All-American junior season at Clemson, definitely didn't get the job done a year ago. In a sign of things to come, Allen was wide open at midfield in front of the Patriots bench when quarterback Tom Brady overthrew him on the first offensive play of the season. While the misplay wasn't Allen's fault, things never improved for him. With the exception of his season when he suffered a season-ending hip injury on Week 1, Allen established career lows for targets, 22, receptions, 10, yards, 86, and offensive snaps, 41.7%. Allen didn't catch his first pass until Week 9, and while it was good for touchdown, it turned out to be his only score of the season after entering the year with 19 touchdowns in 56 career games, and he wasn't targeted for a pass in 3 playoff games. No one was harder on Allen than himself. While that high degree of personal scrutiny can be counterproductive to some players, that didn't seem to be the case here. One of the things we stress here is mental toughness, Allen said. If I can't be hard on myself, then who can be hard on me? I think it starts with me. The expectation for myself mean more to me than any other expectations on myself. So I need to step up to the game and execute to my own expectations. That's sound advice, especially if Allen hopes to stick in September. Allen has fallen behind mostly improved sophomore Jacob Hollister on the depth chart and is also facing a challenge from 4th-year pro Will Tye, who started his career with seasons of 42 and 48 receptions with the New York Giants. The biggest advantage the 6'3", 265-pound Allen has over his 2 challengers is he's a vastly superior blocker. The fact Allen is due to make $5 million this season, which is a lot of money to pay a 3rd-string tight end, and can be released without taking a cap hit, are also working against him. So has his uneven performance in camp, which included a pair of drop passes on Friday. In the meantime, Allen adheres to the advice of Gronkowski while trying to earn a roster spot. He's an incredible athlete and works incredibly hard. But at the end of the day, he understands we play a kid's game, and it's about having fun, Allen said. And if the good times translate to a healthy performance, Allen would finally become the reliable tight end the Patriots envisioned when they acquired him last year. And from the Red Sox notebook, caption, bullpen session a success for Rodriguez. By Bill Koch. Boston. Eduardo Rodriguez appears to be making significant strides in his bid to return from the disabled list and help the Red Sox down the stretch. The left-hander threw off the mound at Fenway Park prior to Sunday's series finale with the Yankees. Rodriguez, right ankle, faced teammate Rafael Devers, who stood in the batter's box while the pitcher fired in cut fastballs, sliders, and changeups. Rodriguez estimated he threw 30 pitches during the afternoon session, his most significant action since suffering his injury in a July 14 start against the Blue Jays. My ankle is really good, Rodriguez says. Feels great. It was fine throwing tonight. That was a test today on the main diamond and everything, and it feels really good. That was impressive, honestly, Boston manager Alex Cora said. He threw a bullpen, and that was good to see. Rodriguez was in the midst of a 19-inning scoreless string when he turned the ankle, covering first base on an infield grounder. He's been in and out of a walking boot and receiving regular treatment of the last 3 weeks, and Boston moved at the trade deadline for Nathan Eovaldi to bolster the rotation. Rodriguez would give the Red Sox another power arm to deploy as a starter or in a relief role should they continue on their expected path toward October's postseason. That's what I want, to be able to come back as a starter, Rodriguez said. But if they put me in the bullpen, or wherever they put me, I've got to go out there and pitch. Despite recent results, Boston is patching things together a bit at this point. Chris Sale, left shoulder inflammation, isn't among the 3 listed starters this week in Toronto, with Drew Pomeranz, Brian Johnson, and Rick Porcello scheduled to take the ball Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. This will mark a second turn missed by Sale since being scratched ahead of Thursday's opening game with New York. Chris is supposed to play catch today, so we'll go from there, Cora said. I was actually in a meeting for a long time there, so I haven't talked to too many people today. We'll see where he's at. Devers, Kinsler staying home. Boston departed late Sunday night for the first leg of a 3-city road trip, and the traveling party was a bit short of full capacity. Devers and Ian Kinsler will both stay behind to rehab their respective left hamstring strains. Blake Swilhart, right hamstring strain, and Stephen Wright, left knee inflammation, will also be out of action at least through the series with the Blue Jays. Devers went through a full baseball workout on Sunday and could begin a brief assignment at Class A Lowell beginning tonight. We have the turf in Toronto, which doesn't benefit them, Cora said. We're mapping that out. Hopefully everything goes well. Kinsler and Swihart are both expected to rejoin the Red Sox next weekend in Baltimore, with Cora hopeful their respective time on the disabled list lost the minimum 10 days. Wright still hasn't resumed his throwing program and has been sidelined since June 23. Pierce returns as DH.
You've just heard news stories from the New Bedford Times. Please stay tuned for more programming. This announcement is brought to you by PAC TV.
Come to New England Village's Memory Cafe at 664 School Street in Pembroke. The Memory Cafe hosts a monthly gathering where people with memory loss and their companions can come together to make new friends, have some fun, and support one another. A sing-along and art project will be included. Memory Cafe will host its monthly meetings on the last Thursday of the month from 12:30 to 2 p.m. Advance registration is required by calling 508-830-4230. Participants must be accompanied by a family member or caregiver. An optional complimentary lunch is available at 11:30 a.m. for anyone signed up for the Memory Cafe. This Memory Cafe is brought to you by New England Village in partnership with the Center for Active Living. For more information or to register, call 508-830-4230. That's 508-830-4230.
My name is Tom Thornton.
And my name is Cindy Thornton. We're retired, and this is how we live united.
We decided to volunteer with United Way at our community free health clinic.
United Way is how we contribute, because we know our time and money are going to the right places.
Judging by the thank yous we get at the clinic, I'd say we're doing the right thing with our retirement, too. We're Tom and Cindy Thornton. We volunteer at our community free health clinic. We don't just wear the shirt.
We live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Thank you for listening to the Massachusetts Reading Network, a window to independent life in your community from Cape Cod to the Berkshires.
Hi, this is volunteer reader Kathleen, broadcasting from Marshfield, Massachusetts. Stay tuned for more coming your way next.
WRRS Middleborough, Pittsfield, WVBF Middleborough, WDJM Framingham, WUML Lowell, WLLO Londonderry.
Coming up next from the Talking Information Center, news stories from the Cape Cod Times.
Good day, this is Steve at TIC in Marshfield with your Cape Cod Times on Monday, August 6th. From the front page of today's Cape Cod Times. Headline, Underwater and Underinsured. Many Cape homes in high-risk zones lack flood insurance or have far less than needed to cover hurricane damage. Article by Christine Legere, Barnstable. The prospect of a hurricane tearing up the East Coast through Long Island and Connecticut, hitting Cape Cod and heading up to Maine, is an event that keeps insurance people awake at night, according to Robert DeSaulniers, a flood insurance specialist for the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Northeast region. Experienced insurance property underwriters, without looking at hurricane maps, will tell you we are so overdue for a major hurricane, he said. Federal disaster funds could be a long time coming and meager in size, DeSaulniers said. So purchasing national flood insurance program policies through the federal government is a property owner's best bet. The majority of those living along the coast of the Cape, however, remain either unaware of the option or simply resistant. The series of nor'easters that ripped through the region in January and March gave coastal residents just a small taste of what could happen if a Category 3 or greater hurricane were to veer their way. Properties that had never been flooded before were underwater, and when it all drained away, owners had to grapple with hefty repairs, which, in some cases, have yet to be made. The home of Joseph Dugas on Sunset Lane in Blyche Point neighborhood of Barnstable, bordered on one side by the ocean and another by a marsh, was hit hard in both the January and March storms. Our cellar had 7 feet of water, and it stayed flooded for a long time, Dugas said. We lost electricity, the furnace, hot water heater, electrical panels, and central air. He replaced those utilities only to lose them again in March. It cost me about $50,000, Dugas said. I've lived here since 1968 and had nothing like this. 8 other homes in the neighborhood are uninhabitable, he said. Several owners are putting their properties up for sale. Dugas didn't have a national flood insurance policy and doesn't plan on getting one now despite his experience. He's not alone. Only 35% of the property owners in Barnstable County high-risk areas have enrolled in the National Flood Insurance Program, according to Shannon Jabot, Community Rating System Coordinator for Barnstable County. Dugas said he was self-insured, paying off the damage and money that such policies would have charged in premiums. It would have cost us $7,000 to $8,000 initially, and it's going up to about $10,000, Dugas said. Flooding is the most common natural hazard in Massachusetts, according to the Homeowner's Handbook to Prepare for Coastal Hazards. developed by a group of state and federal agencies. It can be caused by hurricanes, tropical storms, or northeasters. Standard homeowners insurance policies cover some wind damage from hurricanes. Although in 19 states, including Massachusetts, the coverage includes a sizable deductible. Usually the percentage of the deductible is between 2 and 5%, said Paul Silva, president of Benson, Young & Downs Insurance Agency in Provincetown. If you had a $200,000 house, you would have a $4,000 deductible. If the house is $8,000, the deductible is $16,000. Homeowners policies don't cover damage due to flooding, even if it is associated with a hurricane. But the National Flood Insurance Program, overseen by FEMA, has offered owners an opportunity to recoup at least some of their losses. Residential policies include up to $250,000 in coverage for damage to a home structure and essential systems, such as heat and electricity. The program also offers a policy for personal property damage capped at $100,000. Non-residential property owners can get policies covering up to $500,000 for structures and $500,000 for personal property. Fear of high premiums and large deductibles has caused many in the high-risk zones to shy away from getting government-backed policies. Buildings in designated flood hazard areas, zones A and V, on federal flood maps, have slightly more than 1 in 4 chance of flooding over the period of a 30-year mortgage. Owners that have federally backed mortgages in these flood hazard areas are required to get National Flood Insurance Program policies. After the winter storms, homeowners' interest in purchasing these policies increased, according to Silva, but they didn't necessarily buy it. There are a lot of gaps in federal insurance, Silva said. Buildings here on the Cape are very old. A lot of costs would not be covered, no matter what kind of policy you had. If the expense of repairs represents 50% of a building's value, the renovated structure must be in compliance with current floodplain ordinances, which can be expensive. The government policies also don't cover the cost of those who must live somewhere else because their homes are uninhabitable. Congress enacted the National Flood Insurance Program in 1968, but it has since undergone changes. Some of the most significant are recent adjustments to flood maps in 2014 that placed 8,000 Cape properties into high-risk zones that had not previously carried that designation. Premiums are also being adjusted through yearly increases under the federal Biggert Waters Act of 2012 to reflect the actual risk a property has of flood damage. The flood insurance program was $24 billion in the red after payouts for Superstorm Sandy. Yearly increases on residential policies are capped at 15%, but are usually less than that. Premiums on non-residential properties go up 25% annually until they are adequately reflect risk. Congress just last week voted to extend the current National Flood Insurance Program to November 30th. It had been set to expire July 31st. Without the extension, existing policies could not be renewed and home purchases in risk areas by buyers who needed mortgages, and therefore federal insurance would have been delayed. The average premium for